Okay, so welcome to our first topic for UTS, which is the philosophical perspective of the self. Okay? So actually, ito yung pinakamahirap na lesson or topic for UTS. So that's why on our video conferencing next week, okay, so per schedule po yun, magsasend po ako sa ating Facebook page. Magdi-discuss ako a little bit lang or parang review and entertain some questions if ever lang na may mga points kayong hindi na gets dito sa pre-recorded video natin. Okay? So to start, we have the philosophical perspective of the self. So the study of the self, according to Martin Buber, okay, is a unique area of inquiry. So bakit daw siya sinabing unique area of inquiry? Why? Kasi hindi katulad sa ibang sciences, just like science, yes, and math. Lalo na sa math, we have the question, then when you apply a formula, eventually makukuha mo yung sagot. But then, when you ask or inquire kung ano ba talaga ang self, there are many questions. There are many answers. Di mo alam kung totoo o hindi. Okay? Because we're actually questioning ourselves. Okay? So imagine that. So mahirap siyang gawin. Okay? And you need to be a critical thinker just to create a philosophy pertaining kung ano nga ba ang self. Okay? So, kahit gano'n siya kalawak, yung question or inquiry for the self, we will just limit ourselves into these three perennial questions by John Ruskin. Okay? So, number one, we have this question of identity. Who am I? Diba? So, lagi nyo rin tinatanong sa sarili nyo. So, sino nga ba ako? Okay? Ano nga ba ako? Something like that. Okay? So, sabi nga nila, even at the end of our life, even at our demise, we cannot fully understand pa rin who am I or sino nga ba ako. Okay? So that's the question of identity. Next, where does man come from? Okay? So I'm sure meron na kayong mga ideas when you say question of origin, di ba? So may kita niyo yan sa science book, saan pa ba? Sa history books, di ba? To name a few, we have the Big Bang Theory, we have the Fishman Theory, everything, okay? Questioning our origin, kung saan nga ba tayo nagmula. Okay? So of course, nag improve naman yan with the help of science and technology, nagkakaroon tayo ng ideas kung saan ba tayo nanggaling. And lastly, the third question will be, does man's life have purpose or question of destiny? Ito. So of course, tayong lahat, we question ourselves kung ano ba yung destiny natin. Okay, saan ba tayo tutungo? Diba? Pag naliligo ka, nagsha-shower, pagising mo na umaga, you're always asking yourself, why I am here? What is my destiny? Saan nga ba ko? Ano ba yung tadhana ko sa buhay? Something like that. Okay, so that's the three perennial questions. In our discourse or throughout the course, sabi ko nga marami tayong theories na i-discuss. Why? Bakit sir ang daming theories na kailangan i-discuss? Because it is impossible kasi to stick into one theory to explain ourselves. Okay? So sobrang daming possible outcomes, sobrang daming possible answers, causes, something like that. Okay? Walang definite concept kung paano nga ba nabubuo ang self, ano yung nature ng self, di ba? Something like that. Okay? So in the philosophical perspective, we have these three approaches. First is the Judeo-Christian theological approach. So itong approach na to mostly discusses more on the religious side. Okay? So explaining the Alpha One na may creator tayo, na destiny is planned. Okay? Planado na yung destiny natin. Something like that. Then number two, we have the philosophical approach. For the philosophical approach, these are the theories created by critical thinkers. So mamaya discuss natin kung sino-sino sila. So itong mga critical thinkers na to, kilala niyo yan. Sa sobrang lagi sila nag-iisip, okay, nung three perennial questions na yon, nag-come up sila with a certain philosophy explaining kung paano ba nabubuo ang self. Okay? Then last, we have the scientific approach. Of course, para masabing scientific approach, yung isang concept, kailangan nag-undergo siya ng scientific method. So first, ano nga ba ang philosophy? Okay, so let's look at the meaning. Philo means love, then Sophia means wisdom. Okay, so it's love of wisdom. So when you say philosophers naman, these are the persons who really want to ask questions. Okay, habi na nila na pagkagising na umaga, pagising lang ng umaga, magtatanong sila, ganito, ganyan, bakit ako nabubuhay, what is my destiny, bakit siya ganito, something like that. Okay? So, philosophy, di ba? So, minsan ginagamit natin yung term na ang pilosopo mo, something like that. So, bakit ba kasi ganun? Sabi natin critical thinkers yung pilosopo, pero ba't ginagamit siya in a way like that, di ba? Namimilosopo ka na ate, something like that. Okay, dahil sabi ni William James, sabi dito, argues that philosophy is a usually stubborn attempt to think clearly. Okay? So, you cannot be a philosopher or you can't be a philosopher, okay, if you're just thinking clearly. Okay? Ano ba ibig sabihin nyo dun, sir? Okay? So, si philosopher po kasi, pag sila po yung nag-iisip, okay, in layman's term, ito pang tinatawag natin thinking out of the box. Okay? So, hindi sila nagsasettle sa isang way of thinking, sa isang perspective. Okay? They try to approach everything. Okay? Just to search for meaning in life. Okay? So, it's a stubborn attempt to think clearly. If you think clearly, if ganyan lang yung thinking mo, nakakwadrado lang, sa isang perspective lang, hindi yun philosophy. You should exercise your freedom to search for meaning, okay, inquiry to nature, okay, an essence of man. And of course, the world around and within him. So according yan kay William James. Okay, so now, focusing sa ating mga philosophers, we have these two great Greek philosophers. So, I'm sure kilala nyo na to, Socrates and Plato. Okay, so before that, tingnan muna natin kung ano yung pagkakaparehas ng mga Greek philosophers. Okay, so first one, so yun nga, sila talaga yung mga lodi, sobrang tatalino. Sila yung for study of questioning everything around us. Okay? So, this includes study of man. Okay? So, we have this Protagoras maxim or quote, which is, man is the measure of all things or homo mensura. So, sir, ano po ibig sabihin ng homo mensura? When you say homo mensura, let's put for example, yung ating mga ancient times, okay? Homo erectus, Homo sapiens, okay? Ang kanilang vina-value pa lang is survival, okay? Dito kasi, ibig sabihin ng measure, man is the measure of all things. When you translate it in a more understandable terms, si man daw ang nagbibigay ng value sa bagay-bagay. Okay? So dahil nga dati, yung mga nakaraang tao, mga ancient man, Homo sapiens, Homo erectus, they only value the concept of survival. Okay? But then we evolve, nag-develop tayo, eventually, nagkaroon tayo ng value for education. Okay? So kung makikita mo, sino ba nabibigay ng value? Okay? It's actually the man. Man is the measure of all things. Man is the one who gives value kung ano man yung gusto niyang bigyan ng value. Okay? So for example, up to now, survival lang yung vina-value natin. We won't be having any schools, di ba? Any institutions for education because we don't value education. But then, today, nowadays, nakita natin yung value ng education. That's why ang education ay nagkaroon ng measure, nagkaroon siya ng halaga or value because of man. Okay? So, I hope na-gets nyo yun. Tanong nyo na lang ulit pag di nyo masyado na-gets sa ating video conference next meeting. Okay? So, of course, Greek philosophers, man-centered, nature of man, virtue, and human personality. Okay? So, another, tawag dito, pagkakaparehas, okay, of the Greek philosophers is yung kanilang body-soul compound. So, naniniwala sila na ang self ay nakikita as two separate entities. Okay, so we have the body and the soul. Okay, so let's look at the first philosophy by Socrates entitled The Rationalistic Moral Philosophy. Okay, so ito tandaan nyo. When you say kay Socrates, he is putting emphasis sa importance ng moral sa ating buhay. Sabi dito, happiness without morality is impossible. Okay? His philosophy is chiefly centered on the moral aspect of man. Okay? So, hindi lang tayo basta katawan, hindi lang basta tayo isang thinking being, but also a moral being. Okay? So, merong morality aspect sa atin in creating our self. Okay? So sabi ni Socrates, how the self can be able to live a morally good life. Okay? So first of course, sabi nila, dun tayo sa morality. So wag tayo masyado mag-focus sa material things, sa fame and prestige. Okay? You should focus on your moral life. Okay? Do I live morally? Do I live good? Something like that. Those are the questions to ask. Second, of course, you need to improve your soul. Okay, so how can you improve your soul? Okay, si soul kasi, nandun si morality. Okay, so dito parang tinatrato kasi ni Socrates si soul as our mind. Okay, so of course, inside our mind is our morality. Okay, so paano daw mai-improve ang ating morality? Is achieved through quest for wisdom and truth. Okay, so alam niyo naman yung difference when it comes to knowledge and wisdom. Okay? So, knowledge is actually just information. Alam mo lang siya, alam mo kung paano gawin to. But when you say wisdom, okay, you have this wisdom to use it. Okay? So, alam nyo kung paano siya gamitin. May morality on using that knowledge. Okay? So, in that way, sabi ni Socrates, we can improve our soul. Next, third, okay, lagi mo daw i-examine ang sarili mo if your life is worth living. Okay? So, isipin mo kung ibang tao ba ang nababuhay sa buhay ko, magugustuhan kanila, kaya nila yung buhay ko. Something like that. So, ayun yung questions dito sa third one. Okay? So, when you live with morals, with your morals, you can find happiness. Okay, so next naman po, will be the theory of Plato. Okay? So, ito medyo magulo talaga yung kay Plato. Dualistic and idealistic abstract view. Okay? So, in his theory, talagang gumawa siya entirely new concept kung paano niya explain ang self. Okay? So, pag binasa nyo, the self is a rational substance consisting of body and the soul. Okay? So, soul derived from world of ideas and body, world of matter. Okay? So, sir, ano ibig sabihin nun? Let's look for the second slide. Next slide. Okay. So, sabi dito, man is essentially a soul imprisoned in a body. Okay? So, yung self daw na nagre-reflect sa ating mundo, yung pinapakita natin, okay, is mortal. Imperfect copy of the original self in the perfect realm of world of ideas. Okay? So, just imagine yung projector. Okay? So, yung projector, hindi naman talaga sa kanya, hindi naman talaga yun. Yung originally yung pinoproject niya. Okay, actually, di ba, syempre, nasa mga laptop natin. So, yung laptop is the soul imprisoned in the body and is just projected, okay, into the mortal world. Okay? So, ibig sabihin lang nun, in-emphasize dito ni Plato na yung kaluluwa natin, which contains the soul, okay, is imprisoned in a body which is considered as a container. Okay? So, si body daw ay isang container kung nasaan si soul, which is si body, pinoproject niya ang soul sa mortal world. Okay? But then, even though pinoproject ni body si soul, okay, si soul again, siya yung myself. Okay? So, ulitin ko lang, si soul ay yung myself which is imprisoned in a body which is considered as a container. Okay? So, si body as a container reflects this self into the mortal world. Okay? But not imperfect. Okay? So, isa pang emphasis ni Plato, self is a rational animal. Okay, capable of knowing the reality of the universe. What do you mean, sir, by rational animal? So, ibig sabihin lang nun, siya yung nag-iisip, siya yung nagdadahilan. Okay, so, yun daw si self. So, ito pa, karagdagan sa mga terms na sinasabi ni Plato is the Plato's tripartite of the soul. Okay? Si soul daw ay divided into three. Okay? The head, the heart, and the stomach. Okay? Kung isisi natin, first, the head is the highest. The element of reason, the pursuit of knowledge and truth. Okay? So, very philosophical. Okay? So, piece of advice, since lahat ito ay new or kumbaga very different concept, okay, just try to intindihin siya as it is. Okay? So, eventually makahanap din tayo ng connection. Okay? So, first, we have the head, element of reason. Next, we have the heart, okay, the spirited element or the spirit of or the element of spirit. So nandito din yung ating mga emotions, okay, and striving for success and public acclaim. And of course, the stomach, the body, bodily appetite, desire and needs, and the bottom of hierarchy. Okay, so very materialistic lang daw si stomach. So again, the Plato's tripartite of the soul, the head or the element of reason, yung nag-iisip, knowledge and truth, the heart, spirited element, which is the emotions, striving for success and public acclaim, and the stomach, pinakababa, material gains lang. Bodily appetite, yung mga desire natin, needs, that's the stomach. Okay? So, paano naman ito kinonsolidate o pinag-relate ni Plato? Okay? So, ang goal kasi ni Plato para ma-achieve natin, okay, ang self is to have a sense of well-being. Okay? So, since si head ang ating reason, okay, kung makikita niyo yung meaning ng the head kanina, 'di ba? Kanyang goal is for truth and wisdom. So, dapat lang na si head ang mag-oversee, okay, or maging in charge dun sa other two part of the soul. Okay? So, for example lang, 'di ba? So lagi tayong sinagsabihan when we're in love, lagi sinasabi na, "Oh, gamitin mo yung ulo mo ha. Ulo mo dapat ganyan ganyan. Mag-isip ka nga," something like that. So, same concept din naman pag in-apply dito sa sinasabi ni Plato that the head must take charge. Siya dapat yung laging mauuna, okay? Mag-isip. For example, pag nagutom ka, 'di ba? Pag nagutom ka, for example, nasa klase ka, tapos nagutom ka, ang nag-a-act doon is of course si stomach, okay? Si stomach kasi syempre siya yung ating bodily appetite. So, pag nagutom ka, pag sinabi ni Plato na, "Uy, hindi, nasa klase ka," okay? You must put your head in charge. So, dapat siya yung masusunod. Okay? Paano naman kay heart? Hindi naman tayo puro dapat emosyon. 'Di ba? Si heart daw ang ating emotional or spiritual element. So even though emotions are very important on our lives, again, head must take charge. Okay? Or yung rationality pa rin. Okay? So, katulad daw kay Socrates, sabi ni Plato, ganun pa rin. So, need mo pa rin mamuhay morally to achieve happiness. Karagdagan lang para ma-achieve natin, bukod sa pagiging morally, kailangan may harmony or balance kay head, heart, and stomach. Okay? So, na-example ko na yan kanina. So, paano magkakaroon ng harmony? Kailangan laging si head daw ang magte-take in charge. Okay? At hindi si heart and si stomach. Okay, next. So, the self in the medieval philosophy. Okay? So, just a background. Sa medieval period kasi, they are very theocentric. When you say theocentric, so talaga nire-relegate nila God as the center of their lives. Okay? So, that's why Saint Augustine, since medieval philosophy, sabi niya, sa medieval philosophy, self to secondary concern. Okay? So, yung inquiry natin sa self ay hindi gaano kaimportante. Okay? Why? Because in the medieval philosophy, ang kanilang first concern or primary concern is God and faith. Okay? So, we don't, di sila masyado nag-inquire kung saan ba nanggaling ang origin ng self. Basta ang sasabihin nila, ang origin is creation of God. Okay? So, human truth to divine truth. Okay? Faith is fundamental. Human reason is meant to strengthen the faith. Okay? So, human reason here in medieval philosophy is not used for inquiries of the self. Okay? But is used to strengthen the faith to whom? Of course, to the primary concern, si God. Okay? So, ganyan po ang ating medieval philosophy. Okay? So, isang notable person po na gumamit ng medieval philosophy is si Saint Augustine. Okay? So, he blended Christianity with the philosophy of Plato. Okay? So, titingnan natin kung anong bagay or isang part sila nagkaparehas ni Plato. Okay? So, etong tripartite being. So, kung kay Plato merong the head, the heart, and the stomach, kay Saint Augustine naman, okay, kasama niyang gumawa nito si Saint Thomas Aquinas, is the body, the soul, and the spirit. Okay? So, mas simple niya lang in-explain tong tripartite. Okay? So, the body is the outer immortal part. Ito daw ang nakikipag-interact sa outer world. That is the body. Next, we have the soul, inner part, okay, which is composed of the mind. Siya naman yung nagtitake charge sa ating emotions and the will. Okay? And the soul is also created to administer the body. Okay? Or controlling si body. And lastly, since medieval philosophy nga, very theocentric, okay, or very religious, the spirit, the innermost and core part of the self in which the self can commune with God. Okay, so ito daw yung nakikipag-communicate kay God. Again, kung si Plato ay merong the head, the heart, and the body, or the stomach rather, si St. Augustine naman and St. Thomas Aquinas may body, soul, and the spirit. Okay, so sabi dito ni St. Augustine, the faith illumines the mind of the self and enables reason to understand the essential truths about reality. Okay? So, sinasabi dito, yung faith natin sa God, this will eventually lead us on knowing ourself. So, next, the self in the modern philosophy. Okay? So, madami-dami sila. Let's look at their theories. So before that pala, so let me explain lang. Okay? So what brings the birth of the modern philosophy? Okay, so na-discuss natin last time. The collapse of the medieval period paved the way for the birth of the modern philosophy. Okay, bakit? Medieval period, 'di ba? Sabi natin is very theocentric or naka-center dun sa faith and God as a creator. Okay? So, since the Renaissance, nung dumating si Renaissance, nag-collapse si medieval period, nagkaroon ng rebirth of learning. So, again, nagkaroon na naman ng malakas na wave for inquiry for the self. Okay? And again, yung focus natin ay kay man ulit. Okay? So, comparing to medieval period, di ba sabi natin, ang first concern nila is God and faith. Second concern lang ang self. But then, in modern philosophy, nagkaroon ng rebirth of learning, nagkaroon na naman ng inquiry for self. Bumalik yung focus natin to man and self. Okay? So, that's the birth of modern philosophy. So, first of all, kilalang-kilala nyo na yan. Siguro narinig nyo na yung kanyang mga quotes. René Descartes. Okay, so ang kanyang theory is the extreme dualistic separation of mind and body. Okay, so wag tayo masyado mag-focus dito sa substances. Ang sinasabi na naman dito is, di niya dinisregard yung God. Okay? So, sabi niya lang dito, there's a difference. When you're talking about the idea of God, it's infinite. Ibig sabihin, it's infinite, hindi siya distinct, hindi eksakto, there are many changes. But then, when you talk about the ideas of man, kung ano man yan, whether the body or the soul, it's always finite. Or it means may exact definition. Kaya tinawag niyang extreme dualistic and separation of mind and body. Okay? So, bakit po ganon? Bakit extreme dualistic? Ibig sabihin yun, pag translate natin siya into layman's term, sabihin, talagang sineperate niya si body from soul. Kung maalala nyo, nung diniscuss natin si Plato and Socrates, sinabi rin naman nilang body and soul, but then there's a relationship between the body and soul. Diba? But then, in case of René Descartes, there's an extreme dualistic and separation of the body and soul. Okay, so paano niya pinaghiwalay si body and soul? Una, okay, dinegrade niya si body into a simple material, mortal, and non-ticking substance that is governed only by mechanical laws. Okay, so this time talagang trinate niya lang si body as a mere container of the soul. Okay, so 'di ba doon kay Plato sabi niya, si stomach, 'di ba, as part of the body, uh, meron siyang needs. Nandun yung mga desires natin. But then, for the body, okay, denigrate niya si body into just a material. Parang substance lang. Okay? Non-thinking material. Okay? In contrast, binigyan niya naman ng spotlight si mind, which is the non-material, immortal, and conscious being. Okay? So, thinking is an activity which primarily spiritual and does not require the body as a medium. Okay? So, yung tinatawag natin extreme dualistic. Define niya separately, okay, in extreme measures, si body and si soul or si mind. Okay? So, that's why, okay, kung nakita nyo na yung quote na yan, I think, therefore I am. Okay? Ang sinasabi lang dyan ni René Descartes, a thinking a thinking mind is a self. Okay? So when you start thinking, when you start being conscious, when you start being aware, dun na nabubuo yung self mo. Okay? So at this point, talagang dinisregard niya si body. And focus lang dun sa creation of self by the soul or the mind. Okay? So that's for René Descartes. Next, we have John Locke. Okay, so British philosopher. Ito lang tatandaan nyo. Knowledge of reality must pass the test of sensory experience. Wait. Okay, so later na lang. I will explain kung paano gumagana yung theory ni John Locke. Okay, so first let's discuss this tabula rasa. Okay, so ang concept na naman ng tabula rasa, the moment we're born, we are a blank sheet of paper. Okay? So, wala tayong alam. We're just blank sheet. We have no emotions. We have whatever. Okay? So, nalalagyan lang yan or nasusulatan lang daw yung blank sheet of paper na yan when we start having life experiences. Those life experiences, therefore, make our self. Okay? So, yun yung main concept ni John Locke. Tabula rasa. We are a blank sheet of paper, nothingness, but then, when we acquire life experiences, dun na nabubuo yung ating self. Okay? Next. Okay, ayan. So, as we grow, yan ang sabi natin, we accumulate experiences. And yun yung nasusulat sa ating sheet of paper. Or in this case, our mind. Okay? So, si self, therefore, pag may na-accumulate na experiences, dun lang siya mag-i-exist. Okay? Kung ano mang consciousness, kung ano mang experiences na pumasok sa mind mo or sa sheet of paper mo, that will determine yourself. Okay? So, at this point, capable na daw si self to think, reason, and reflect on your identity. Okay? So, another thing, sabi din ni John Locke, okay, meron din siyang extreme duality when it comes to the body and the soul or the mind. Okay? So, ayan, physical body is just a substance and very integrated si personal self. Hiwalay na hiwalay siya sa physical body. So, whatever changes, okay, mag-undergo sa physical body, the personal self remains. Okay? So, ano lang makakapagpabago sa personal self? Sabi nga natin kanina, the accumulated experiences. Okay? So, that's the only reason kung paano magde-develop yung self mo from just a tabula rasa or a blank sheet of paper. Okay? So, therefore, personal identity is distinct from whatever body itself is associated with. Yon, si John Locke. Dito pala ako magsusulat kay David Hume. Okay? So, for David Hume, ito lang tatandaan nyo. Sense impressions. Si self daw ay nabubuo para kay John Locke based on our experiences. But, hindi lang basta experiences. Kung paano natin pinagtutugma, pinagsasama-sama, at ina-arrange yung mga experiences na yun. Okay? So, in this case, we will be using the term sense impressions, aka experiences. So, ano po yung mga sense impressions na yan? Pain, pleasure, heat, cold, etc. So, which are lively and vivid. Okay? So, once na ma-experience natin siya, as is natin siya na-experience. So, yun daw yung nare-record ng ating mind. But then, hindi yun exactly yung mare-recall natin. Okay? So, yung mga recalled copies ng mga impression na to are called ideas. Okay? So, paano po nabubuo yung mga ideas na yan? Okay? So, yun nga, nothing but a collection of different perception from sense impressions. Okay? So, paano po nabubuo yung mga ideas na yan? Okay? So, we have two faculties. When you say two faculties, we have two machines, kumbaga. Memory and imagination. So, si memory, siya yung storage. Okay? Lahat ng sense impressions, pain, gratitude, lahat po yun, nasa-store sa ating memory. In exactness. Exactly kung paano mo siya na-perceive. Okay? So, in the creation of idea, dun na magi-intervene si imagination. Si imagination make it possible for us kung paano natin i-arrange, i-formulate, or i-order yung mga experiences na yon into an idea. Okay? So, let's try making a diagram. Screen share. Let's have our whiteboard. Okay. Let's put it this way. Sabi nga natin, so we have the sense impressions, or SI for short, but color blue to. Okay. So we have our sense impressions. So yan yung basic. Okay. So pain, happiness, gratitude. Okay. So si sense impression ay nasa store kay, saan guys? Sa, may text pala. Sa memory. Okay. Okay, so whenever we experience or perceive sense impressions, napupunta siya kay memory. Okay? Next. So, syempre, hindi lang naman siya mag-stay kay memory. Eventually, we will use it. Okay? Diyan na po mag-intervene si imagination. Okay? Si imagination, marami ang tawag dito. Materials, kung paano niya i-arrange, i-order, o i-formulate lahat ng sense impressions na nakuha mo. Okay? So, ano pa yung mga materials na yon? It's either we have resemblance, contiguous to time and space, and cause and effect. Okay? So, gagawin ko lang ng diagram para mas maintindihan nyo pag nag-continue ka mag-discuss dun sa PowerPoint. Okay? So, pag dumaan na siya, dyan, na-resemble na kung ano mang gamitin dyan ng imagination, dun tayo magkakaroon ng, dun na bubuo si idea. Okay. So, ito yung byproduct. Okay, so again, we have this basic sense impressions, whether pain, gratitude, basta yun, lahat ng emotion, something like that, fear, which is stored to our memory. So, hindi lang siya magsistay doon, eventually gagamitin natin siya through imagination. Si imagination, using these three materials, okay, or tools, yung pala yung exact term, dun mabubuo si ideas. It is recalled differently kasi from a basic sense impressions, inayos mo siya, nagkaroon ng relationship, yung mga experiences mo, you recalled it differently. Okay? So, stick lang tayo dyan. Let's go back to our slide. Okay, so memory and imagination. Okay? So, three general principles of association ang tawag dito sa tatlong to. Ito ang ginagamit ng imagination para i-order niya or tawag dito, i-formulate yung ating mga sense impressions. Okay? So, let's take an example for each one of this. For example, we have resemblance. Okay? So, resemblance occurs, for example, nagdi-discuss ka or nagre-report ka sa harap ng klase. Tapos, pumiyok ka. Okay? So, of course, yung makukuha mong sense impression doon is nahiya ka. Right? So, meron ka ng sense impressions of nakakahiya. So, ngayon, nung pauwi ka na ng bahay, nung pasakay ka ng jeep, bigla ka nauntog. So, nakakahiya din yon. So, dahil yung dalawang experience na yon is both nakakahiya, it was associated because of their resemblance. Okay? So, in layman's term, magkamukha sila na experience. Parehas nakakahiya. So, ano mga possible ideas na mag-come up doon? Na nakakahiya ka, na sobrang clumsy mo, 'di ba? Something like that. Okay? So, that's the use of resemblance. Ganon gamitin ni imagination ng ating resemblance. Okay? Next. Contiguous in time and space. So, paano naman to? For example, ito, 'di ba sa Filipino, pag may nakita kang spaghetti, lumpia, ano pa ba? Basta yun. Sige, spaghetti and lumpia. Pag nakita niyo yung spaghetti and lumpia, ano agad ang naiisip niyo? Of course, merong birthday. Okay? Contiguous in time and space. So, there are things, di ba, pa nag-occur, for example, lunchtime, tapos may spaghetti. Of course, ang ma-associate nyo siya into birthday. May nagbo-birthday. Okay? So, for example, naghanda ka ng spaghetti on gabi ka na nag-spaghetti, for example lang. 'Di ba? So, most likely, hindi mo siya ma-associate na may birthday. Okay? Because it's not contiguous in time and space. Okay? So, hindi yun yung pagkakaalam natin na may birthday. But then, if makakita ka na naghanda ng spaghetti, ganyan, or lumpia, hapon, di ba, merienda, ang may isip agad natin is may birthday. Okay? So, sana na-gets nyo ako. Okay. Next. Number 3 is related in terms of cause and effect. Okay? So, madali lang yan. For example, tawag dito, nakita ka may usok sa taas or sa malayo. For example, sa subdivision nyo may usok, tapos nakikita nyo may nagtatabuang tao, may nagsisigawan, ang may isip nyo agad is may sunog. Okay? So, hindi naman pwedeng may baha, hindi naman pwedeng may nagwawala, something like that. Ang meaning agad natin or definition agad natin na makukuha is may sunog. Okay? Kasi alam natin na pag may usok, may apoy. Cause and effect. Okay? So, yun po yung 3 general principles of association. Okay? So, that's under imagination. So, pag lahat po ng sense impressions natin, di ba, nag-undergo na dito, dun na magkakaroon ng ideas. And all those ideas, all those recalled experiences forms our notion of the self. That's for David Hume. So now we're going to for the theory of Immanuel Kant. Okay? So malapit na tayong matapos. For Immanuel Kant naman, ito lang tatandaan nyo. Meron siyang sensory component and rational component. Okay? So human knowledge or perception is composed of sensory and rational component. So sir, ano po yung dalawang yan? First, sensory component, okay? Siya, syempre, kung naalala niyo si sensory impressions, di ba? Yun yung mga experiences natin outside the world, okay? At the mortal world. So, pain, gratitude, fear. So, his sensory component, siya yung tumatanggap niyan. Okay? Siya yung nagsusstore, siya yung nagko-collect. Okay? But those sensory impressions remains to be walang meaning, something like that. Okay? Unless the racial component ay nag-act upon it. Okay? So, si racial component yung nagbibigay ng meaning kay sensory impressions na inipon or kinolect ni sensory component. Okay? So, the racial component is also called by Kant a priori. Okay? So, comes from the mind itself and is independent of sensation. Okay, so ganun po yung difference ng sensory component and racial component. Dadaan kay sensory component, okay, siya yung receiver ng ating sensory impressions, and sa racial component ang bibigay ng meaning ng sensation na yun. Okay? So para sa maintindihan nyo, for example, wala sa racial component. You just feel pain, but not actually feel pain. Okay? So naka-receive ka na ng sense of pain, but not actually feel pain. Pag wala si racial component. So, ganun po sila gumagana. Receiver, okay, and the identifier or yung nagbibigay ng meaning. Next, okay? So, against na sa sinabi, di ba, ni John Locke, which is yung tabula rasa, na we are a clean slate, etc., etc. Sabi naman ni Immanuel Kant na hindi tayo clean slate. Okay? Rather, we have this equipped built-in structure kung saan siya yung mag-organize ng categories. I mean, ng ating mga sensory impressions. Okay? So, these categories, ito kumbaga yung mga materials or tools ni rational component. Okay? So, they can sort out, organize, relate, synthesize the collection of sensor data or sense organ taken. Okay? So, paano natin i-connect? Si sensory component, siya yung tatanggap ng sensory impressions, which is meaningless pa. Okay? But then, when rational component act upon those meaningless sensations, gamit yung categories as its tool, dun pa lang magkakaroon ng meaning yung ating senses. Okay? Ang daming terms. Okay. So anyway, lastly, for Immanuel Kant, meron siyang dalawang tinatawag na, meron siyang dalawang self. Okay? Dinivide niya into two. First is the empirical self. Empirical means derived from experience. So ito yung part ng self natin, which is a collection of experiences. Thus, this collection of experiences, siya yung bumubuo ng ating physical aspect, memories, personality, history, and culture. So whatever we experience, whatever we develop, is part of our empirical self. Okay? Next is a transcendental self, is an independent entity. Okay? So, aside from empirical self, meron natin transcendental self. Ito yung independent entity, okay, which constructs and gives meaning to collection of sensory data. Okay? So, eventually, pag plinat ulit natin, lahat ng experiences natin, sensory impressions, will eventually go to our transcendental self. Okay? Yung transcendental self, siya yung mag-i-interpret no, bibigyan ng meaning bago siya ma-embed o tumatak into our empirical self and become part of our memories, personalities, history, and culture. Okay? So, if you have questions, again, magulo talaga siya. So, ask kayo ng question sa ating video conference and I'm willing to explain it again. Examples, sige, yun. So, that's for Immanuel Kant. So, the self constructs itself. Okay? So, kanina, di ba, nakita natin na hindi blank slate yung self. Either merong mga tools and materials na present sa ating self. That's why, kinunclude ni Immanuel Kant that the self construct itself. It has its own life. It has its own rationality, rational thinking. So therefore, the self is not an object but a functioning object. So yun po ang conclusion ni Immanuel Kant. Next, okay, my favorite part. Siguro natakal nyo rin to at some point sa mga lessons nyo, which is si Sigmund Freud. Okay, si Sigmund Freud naman po, ang kanyang main point of view is the unconscious self. Okay, so when you say unconscious self, it operates at a pre-logical and pre-rational levels. It means you don't know that it's happening. You don't know that you are thinking it. You don't know that you are doing it because it's unconscious. Okay? The moment na malaman mo siya or mapunta sa consciousness mo, di na siya unconscious. Okay? So, unconscious self. So, this unconscious self is actually composed of the id, ego, and superego. So, very popular yung tatlong yan. Okay? So, before we go to the three levels of mind, first, let's discuss naman the conscious self. Okay? So, governed by the reality principle, kung ano yung nangyayari sa harap natin, kung ano yung experience natin, that is the conscious self. Okay? So, guided by the reality principle. Okay? So, both the unconscious and conscious self have the same goal, the satisfaction of needs and the reduction of tension to optimal level. Okay, so let me put this way. So, conscious and unconscious self is two different entities, okay, on our mind. So, unconscious, of course, yung untouched waters, the deep waters of our mind, okay, na hindi natin alam na nag-exist pala doon. Okay? The conscious self, okay, in the contrary, is the reality. Okay? Yung na-experiences natin, naiisip natin, nararamdaman natin, that is the conscious self. Though there are two separate entities, ang kanilang goal is the reduce of tension. Okay? So, mamaya, i-emphasize natin itong reduce of tension na yan. Okay? To optimal level. Okay, so we have this diagram. of the id, ego, and superego. Okay? So first, let's discuss the id. The id, in other words, is called um, the pleasure principle. When you say the pleasure principle, nagre-react lang siya every time na may needs tayo na kailangan isatisfy. So ano po yung mga needs na yon? We have this needs for hunger, for thirst, 'di ba? For security, for sex. That's under id. Okay? So ang tanging iniisip lang ni id is kung anong kailangan mo. Nagugutom ka ba? Nauuhaw ka pa? Something like that. Yun lang yung iniisip ni id regardless kung ano yung reality. Okay? Next, we have the superego. Yung superego po ang tinatawag nating ay nag-ooperate naman po sa moral principle. When you say moral principle, okay, so morality, ang tanging sinusunod po ni superego is always the moral values mo as a person. Yung pong mga moral values na yun ay nade-develop galing, of course, sa ating culture, di ba? As Filipinos, di ba? Very mataas yung very moral being tayo mga Filipinos because of our culture, our religion, di ba? So, all of those, ang tawag dito, ang gumagamit po nun or nag-modulate or nag-mediate is the superego. So, lahat po that concerns our morality. Okay? Then, in the center, may kita nyo is a judge. Okay? Is the ego. Okay? Si ego po siya po ang judge ng ating mind. Sino bang susundin natin? Is it the id or the superego? So, si ego po ay nag-ooperate in reality principle. Okay? Ego is the only thing that is in touch with reality. Okay? So, we can say that both the id and superego are unreliable. Okay. So, yan. So, bakit po siya unreliable, sir? First, id and superego po operates on unconscious levels. Okay? Subconscious and unconscious levels. Since morals yan, and yung mga needs mo, hindi palaging sila yung masusunod. Okay? So, there should be planning on the part of ego kung ano yung dapat gawin. Okay? So, proceed tayo sa example. Sabi ni id, salita siya. Parang ito yung demonyo sa kabila mo. Sabi ni id, I need to eat right this second. Okay, gutom na siya eh. Ang iniisip na naman ni id is yung pleasure to satisfy your sense of hunger. Sa kabila naman, si angel mo, you can do that because you're in the middle of an important meeting. So tama naman si superego, hindi ka pwede basta umalis, bumili ng pagkain, tapos kumain sa gitna ng meeting. Diba? Morality principle. So, inaalagaan mo yung integrity mo, diba? Yung position mo as a person, diba? So, either each of this, okay, whether kung sino yung sundin mo, may effect, okay? For example, lagi mo sinusunod si superego, okay? Lagi mo sinusurpress kung ano yung needs mo, eventually, diba, it will affect your sense of being. Kasi lagi mo sinusunod yung kung ano yung dapat, what is right, kung ano yung morals. Okay? Even na wala na siya sa ayos. Okay? Even irrational na siya. So, ganun din lang po sa in case kay id. Pag di mo siya inatenan, lagi mo sinusunod sa superego, di ba? So, for example, hindi mo sinusunod si id. Okay? So, magugutom ka, mauuhaw ka. Pag lagi mo naman sinusunod si id, lagi lang pleasure nasa isip mo. So, you disregard all your moral values or ethical values. So, kaya, nandun na nag-i-intervene si ego. So, si ego, siya po yung nag-decide kung sino yung susundin, kung ano yung plan natin, okay, para ma-reduce yung tension. Okay? So, going back to sa reduce ng tension, ang tension po dyan is, ano guys, ang tension dyan is between the id and superego is kung kakain ba siya or magsistay siya sa meeting. Okay? So, since si ego po ay nasa conscious level, siya lang yung nasa reality, ano kaya yung pwede niyang gawin to reduce the tension? Okay? So, yun. Pag-isipan nyo. So again, id is the pleasure principle. Lahat lang ng gusto mo sa buhay. Okay? Pagkain, sex, thirst, all of that. And superego is your morality or your values and your ethics. And the ego, yung judge ng ating mind, okay, na mag-mediate, okay, to reduce the tension. Okay, so that's for Sigmund Freud. So, ayan po, other meaning of id, superego, and ego. Okay. So, in conclusion, ang sinasabi na naman po ni Freud, so, lagi pong dapat si ego ang mananaig. Okay? Kasi any of, whether id or superego, maging dominant sa mind levels, okay, hindi siya magiging healthy. So, a harmonious balance for Sigmund Freud is ego at the top, okay, mediating between id and superego. And this will result to mental health and well-being. That's for Sigmund Freud. Okay, last three. Next, we have Gilbert Ryle. Okay, si Gilbert Ryle naman, tatandaan nyo lang dito, diniscredit niya daw yung theory ni Descartes. Okay, dahil nga kay Descartes, di ba, extreme dualism. Hiniwalay niya talaga si body and kay mind. But then, sabi ni Gilbert Ryle, the self then must be comprehended as a pattern of observable behavior. Okay? So, ano ibig sabihin niya doon? So, pag inaalam daw natin si self, kailangan hindi lang yung mind, okay? Yung ilalagay natin as self-inquiry. Okay? So, the self therefore is the way people behave. So, kailangan may kita din natin yung manifestation ng mind through the body. And that's how we will conceive the self. Okay? Again, for Gilbert Ryle, is the way people behave. Okay? In contrast, kay René Descartes, kailangan may manifestation, okay, yung mind through the body. And doon natin mabobuo o makoconstruct si self. Ganun po kay Gilbert Ryle. Okay? So, sana po naintindihan nyo. Tandaan lang, the self, therefore, is the way people behave. Okay? Next, the Churchland, Patricia and Paul Churchland. Okay? So, this one, di ba, na-explain ko kanina yung three aspects or tawag dito. Okay? Kalimutan ko na. But then, this one is the scientific perspective. Okay? So, sabi ni Patricia and Paul Churchland, body-mind problem cannot be solved by philosophers but by neuroscientists. Okay? So, ang upholding nila is on science. Okay? So, they put the brain at the center. Okay? So, brain daw po ang lahat na gumagawa. Every mental state, every emotions, even our morality and free will is product of our brain. Okay? So, kung ano man po ang ating setup ng brain, it will influence our life, physically and mentally. Okay? So, yan, basahin nyo na lang po. So, yan. Through scientific method, nalaman nila na may correlation. Bawat area ng brain ay may kaakibat na mental function, whether cognitive, thinking, or affective, which is our emotions. Okay? So, any physical abnormalities, of course, will cause personality disorders or other mental disorders. Okay? Makita nyo na very scientific. So, other examples, ayan. So, mild cognitive impairment with Alzheimer's disease. Okay, through brain scans. Okay, this one. So, if you don't know OCD, it's obsessive compulsive disorder. To put it in layman's term, when you say OCD kasi, yan, nawala. Explain ko na lang. When you say OCD kasi, so, di ba parang pagkakaalam nyo, when you say OCD is ito yung sobrang perfectionist, something like that. But it's more than that. When you say OCD kasi, their perfectionist personality is driven by anxiety. Okay? So for example, anxiety, ang pinakamaganda example niya kasi in most case of OCD is yung lagi naghuhugas ng kamay. Okay? Naghuhugas ng kamay in terms of OCD is bakit siya naghuhugas ng kamay? Ano yung underlying cause? It's his or her anxiety from her trauma. Okay? Baka nakakita siya ng patay na tao, dugo, nakahawak siya ng dugo, something like that, or maybe aksidente siyang nakasaksak, something like that. Of course, there's a high chance na magiging trauma siya. This trauma, again, will become your anxiety, and this anxiety will manifest. And those manifestations, okay, katulad na paghuhugas sa kamay, sobrang like ka nag-alcohol na parang may tinatanggal ka palagi, that's what you call OCD. Okay, it's not just becoming perfectionist. Okay, so yan, next, brain at rest, reaction to music, the effect of music to our brain. It activates several areas of our brain. Okay, we have this depressed and not depressed. Okay, yan. So, in conclusion, sabi ng ating nila Paul and Patricia Churchlands, the self includes thoughts and emotions and personality traits explained through the function of the brain. So, all about the brain. Okay? And lastly, we have Maurice Merleau-Ponty. Okay? So, yan nga, di ba? Tama naman siya. Lasting and puzzling problems of the in the philosophy is the body-mind relationship. So nakita natin iba't ibang philosophers yung nag-try i-explain yung relationship ng body into mind. Okay? Ang pinagkaiba lang, sabi ni Ponti, wag na daw po nating paghiwalayin si self and the body. Let us treat them as one. Okay? Inseparable unity between the self and the body. Why? Because meron silang mutual relationship. Okay? Though si soul pa rin or si mind pa rin, siya pa rin yung highest being, rational being, the self cannot exist without the body. Okay? Because the body is the one, wala siya dito. Okay. The body is the one who receives sensations from the outer world. Okay? So without the body, kumbaga si self ay senseless. Okay? Wala siyang ma-process na information, so on and so forth. Okay? So, ano namang silbi ni self kay body? Subjectivity or the body subject. Okay? Si body naman po, siya po yung nire-reflect niya ang sarili niya kay self. Okay? So, kung ano po yung manifestation ni self will be manifested to the body. Okay? So, in our general, the body gives meaning to the world of human experience. Okay? So, once the body receives these experiences, the mind processes it, okay, to give meaning to that experience. Okay, so makikita nyo yung kanyang mutual relationship. Okay, one cannot live without the other. So therefore, our body, and without a body, we would be impossible. Ayan. So in conclusion, we would cease human experience, lahat ng nararamdaman natin, lahat ng na-acquire natin, ay hindi natin magagawa without the body. Okay? So parang si self lang, siya lang ang ating processor, siya lang ang nagbibigay ng meaning in these meaningless experiences. But the body is the one who who actually experience. Okay? So that's for Ponti. And that's for our philosophical perspective. Okay? So mahaba talaga siya. It actually spans 1 week just for a discussion. Okay? So ulitin ko lang. If you have any questions, please raise it on our video conference next week. Okay? So try natin sagutin yan and i-put pa into more layman's term na mas maintindihan na lahat. Okay? So therefore, I hope na nabigyan sense ko itong pinakamahirap na topic, which is the philosophical perspective. Philosophy kasi, di ba, very deep-minded, critical thinking. So kung ano-anong terms na yung na-invento nila. But anyway, it's worth reading lalo na when we try to understand ourselves. Okay? So please don't hesitate to reach me out, to message me on Messenger, ask questions, anything under the sun. Okay? So again, this is Sir Neil. Thank you for listening. This will end our topic 1, chapter 1, the philosophical perspective of the self.